Thank you, Attorney Cuevas. Good afternoon, Commissioner or former Commissioner Henares. Disclosure, Commissioner Henares was our classmate together with the Honorable City Justice Linda Uy. So good afternoon. In the letter nominating you for Ombudsman, Presiding Justice of the Court of Tax Appeals Del Rosario stated that, and I quote, "You championed reforms that revolutionized the country's tax system." May I ask if you had also championed reforms to revolutionize the perceived graft and corruption within the Bureau during your time?
Yes, I championed reform that revolutionized integrity in the Bureau of Internal Revenue by making sure that everyone knows that their performance is the one that will promote them, move them to a better office or not. No? So during my time, nobody gave me recommendation letters because everything is based on KPIs and everything is based on your own performance.
On a larger picture, what is your assessment of the current state of graft and corruption in our country?
The current, I think it's we have to accept, no matter how difficult it is, that the major problem we are facing is really graft and corruption. Especially with what's happening now. No? Although I don't want to make any prejudgment, but there's already a frustration among our people that there's prevalent graft and corruption, and we have to accept it and look into it and find ways on how to address it, no? So that we can help our people.
So if we are now to shift our attention to the Office of the Ombudsman, what earth-shaking reforms do you intend to institute or introduce in the office?
Earth-shaking? I don't think it's earth-shaking. No? When I was preparing for this interview, I read up on all the laws that the Ombudsman is supposed to implement. No? I think the laws are good and it's there, but the problem is we do not implement it. So the thing that we need to do is implement it. And the other thing that we probably need to do also now with the Ombudsman is to bring back the importance of SALN, no? The Statement of Asset and Liability and Net Worth, because I think that has been relegated in terms of their importance. No? And also, the other thing that I want to do in the Ombudsman is to make things transparent and to depend more on electronic and documentary evidence rather than on testimonial evidences. No? Because documentary and hard evidence, it's hard to flip it over, right? Whereas if it's a testimonial, somebody might harass the person, the witness. No? But if it's all in document, it's all in electronic evidence, then it's difficult for anyone to change their testimony or the evidence. No? And it also increased the possibility of conviction, no? Because these are hard evidence. And the other thing is to make all the things that's happening in the Ombudsman transparent. No? So like a case management system, everything should be in writing, there should be a timeliness in everything. No? So all of this should be documented and in our records, no? So that it's transparent. And if I'm the head, I can just go to the record and find out what's happening. So those are things, among other things, that needs to be, I think I want to do in the ombudsman. Although I did submit a short-term and long-term plan, no, which expounds on more on what it is that I think need to be done.
One of the major criticisms of Ombudsman Martires was that the conviction during his time, the conviction rate fell sharply from 61.2% in 2020 to 26.5% in a later year, raising doubts about the effectiveness of investigations and case prosecution. Ombudsman Martires defended these figures by pointing to external judicial processes beyond his control. How do you intend to address this?
Well, I think you should prepare your case properly, no? And you should make sure that before you file the case, you yourself are confident that it will lead to a conviction. No? You cannot file a sloppily prepared case and say that it's the fault of somebody else. So that will also be part of the KPI of the people in Ombudsman, no? That when you prepare cases, it should be there should be proper evidence, and you should be well versed in the rules on evidence, especially on electronic evidence, no? Because that's where everything is going to be in the future. So I think the first thing is you should look within the organization and find out what's wrong. Why is it like that? Before you start looking at somebody else and say it's the fault of another institution.
Thank you. That was my final question. I wish you good luck, former Commissioner Kim Henares.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Mejia. Our next interviewer is the Honorable Justice Erlinda Piñera Uy, regular
Attorney
member
Cuevas.
representing the Integrated Bar of the Philippines.
Thank you, and good afternoon to my former classmate, Commissioner Henares. You look good and
Thank you.
relaxed. I hope you are relaxed
Yes.
to be interviewed by two classmates. Anyway, may I know what inspired you to pursue a career in the office of the Ombudsman?
Well, I think first and foremost, I'm still a Filipino, and I would like to help my country. No? So it's an offer to help in any way I can, rather than just complain. No? So this is an offer to do my part if I will be appointed. But if not, I'm sure there are things I can do also as a private sector.
If you were not appointed Commissioner of the Bureau of Internal Revenue, then would you have applied for the office of the Ombudsman? Just curious.
It has never been in my career plan to be in government. So when I went to government, it was actually a detour. So I don't think, if I wasn't appointed in BIR, I don't think I will be involved in government, because that has never been my career plan.
You are currently a self-employed consultant. May I know what field of consultancy do you handle?
Yeah, I do a business management consultancy, legal consultancy. Actually, what I really do is, if there's a problem, I try to help the client solve it using all legal means, no? What the law allows them to do. No? And that's basically my consultancy.
And you do not handle any cases for...
I handle everything except litigation. I don't
Litigation.
like to litigate.
So you were a former BIR commissioner from July 1, 2010 to June 30, 2016. How may your expertise in taxation be applied to eradicate corruption in the government?
Well, I think one of the tools that the Ombudsman uses is the lifestyle check, no? Which is a network method, which is basically what BIR does. No? We filed a lot of run after tax evader case using a network method. No? So we compare, we look at your asset. No? So you say you your net worth is 100 million, then we look at the income tax you filed and you only filed 1 million peso. So it's the same process as you do with lifestyle check, right? And the other thing is like, say, now that there's this controversy about spending, no? It's about money. So what BIR really does is we are good at following the money. No? So it's I think the thing there's when I was in BIR, it's more dealing with the taxpayer, but it's almost the same skill set. But now you're going to deal with government officials and employees.
So it's more concentrated towards public officials.
Yes.
In your action plan for the Ombudsman, you mentioned as one of your long-term plans is the establishment of the Ombudsman Academy. Can you briefly discuss the details on how to attain this goal?
Well, I think you need an approval, no, a law that will establish the Ombudsman Academy, and now you have to discuss it with the legislature to allow for its establishment and the funding thereof, no, and what I think I want to do is institutionalize all those training that the staff of ombudsman should be doing, and put it in a structured manner, so that when a new person come in, there's a structure, there's a way, it's already a curriculum. You teach them already how to do network method, how to do investigation, make aware of how you will have custody of evidence, how to make sure your evidence is admissible to court. No? So you formalize it and institutionalize it into an academy.
So this will be a physical academy, like the Philippine Judicial Academy.
It may or may not be a physical academy. It can be incorporated into the ombudsman itself. No? It can be an online academy, no? Because nowadays everything is online. You don't really need to have a structure, physical structure. No? It really depends on when it will be established, because you can actually do it, and probably the academies also give you a certificate, no? So that it becomes part of you get your merit, civil service qualifications, CESO, whatever, no? So that you can go to other, and probably you can, if you don't like to work anymore with the ombudsman, you can use the same skill set to work for private sector.
In your action plan, you also mentioned under the heading of public education, launch publicity efforts, advertisements, road shows to solicit action and support from the public for anti-corruption efforts, drawing inspiration from Hong Kong's Independent Commission Against Corruption. Can you enlighten us what is this ICAC?
ICAC is the Hong Kong Ombudsman. So basically, they have a program where it's a public awareness program with the Hong Kong residents. No? So basically, what I hear while I was studying all the laws that the Ombudsman is trying to implement, there are things that I'm not aware of. No? So we should make the public aware that these are prohibited act and they can report it. No? So how do they report it? Right? Because, like for example, all this thing about lifestyle ostentatious display, it's actually prohibited already in a law, but I think people are not aware of it, right? So it's part of the public awareness program that should be disseminated to the public, because the public are one of the vanguard that will help us and help public officials stay honest, no? Because we cannot guard everyone, so we need people to be more aware, and if you're more aware, then public official will also be more careful.
My last question, how do you define moral courage in public office? And can you cite an instance in your career when you had to make an unpopular but principled decision?
Well, I find moral courage in my belief in God, And I find moral courage in my upbringing. My parents taught me to do good and to avoid doing bad. And I
This
think,
is in public office.
yeah,
Yes.
I find moral courage from that. No? So when I went into government, I already have this basic in me. And the other thing is my president, Pinoy, also I find courage from him to be able to do what I did because he fully supported me. And it's a 100% support. Instances where it comes to play, I have relatives somebody taught my relative that they can sell them something and not pay taxes. They just have to make it appear like it's a donation and they will be paid abroad. No? So I said to my relative, don't you dare do that because I'm going to file a tax evasion case against you. And I also advise the RDO and regional director of that jurisdiction, told them that you should not allow this transaction because it's not a donation, it's a sale. So I guess that's one of the very clear instances. No? And I think I want also to raise the point about this opposition to my application. That is also one of the things that a government official have to face. No? When you're doing because as a government official, I have also to protect and give due process to the public, to the taxpayer. It's not just because somebody complained that you will hook, line, and sinker believe in it. No? So we have this Mr. Dalanon who was on leave, but when I got into office, he came and said, I have an assessment of 1-point-something billion against a multinational company. So this is a multinational company, and it was the first few months of my service, and we were looking for money. Why won't I be happy to collect that 1-point-something billion pesos? But the taxpayer came and said that that's impossible. No? This is a multinational company. So what I did is I told the taxpayer, let's determine who's telling the truth. Is it okay for you if I reinvestigate and re-audit you? And the taxpayer said yes. So we did a re-audit, and it came down to 4 million pesos. Because the examiner double take up a lot of things and did not want to listen to the position of the taxpayer. And because it dropped from 1 billion to 4 million, I had it re-audited again. And it came out to be 4 million again. So that's because as far as I'm concerned, you pay the right tax, not a single centavo, more or less. No? After that, this is the risk of public office. This person filed a complaint in the ombudsman, which was dismissed. And from time to time, he would post in Facebook about these things, which has already been resolved. And I was really not paying attention to him, but this has been going on already for 2010, so it's now 16 years. I'm already thinking of maybe I should do something, right? But these are things that are hazard of the office. No? If you need to do what is right based on the facts presented and evidence. No? It's not a popularity contest. There.
Thank you for that explanation. And like I said, that was my last question. So good luck to you, Commissioner Henares.
Thank you, Justice Uy. Our next interviewer is the Honorable Congresswoman Jerville Luistro, ex-officio member representing the Legislative Department.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Henares.
Good afternoon po.
I'm sorry I didn't hear very well how the case was concluded. Is it still pending?
No, after that, he again, every time there's a new commissioner, he would raise this issue. No? Then under the time of Commissioner Dulay, the Deputy Commissioner for Legal issued a second letter of authority. And I think that's the subject of the CTA.
How much were you able to collect, ma'am?
4 million.
4 million.
Yeah,
And the ombudsman case that he filed, is it still pending?
Dismissed.
Dismissed already,
Yeah.
after 16 years.
No, it was dismissed while I was in office.
How many years did it take before the conclusion of the ombudsman case?
I think he filed it in 2013. It was resolved in a year's time.
Oh, fast enough.
Yeah.
For my question, Commissioner, earlier you mentioned about SALN,
Yeah.
that you are inclined to rely more on documents and SALN, and talking about instead of testimonial evidence because witnesses can be harassed. That's what you said. About the SALN, this right to public information is of course fundamental. But of course we are aware as well that these SALN are being used as weapons among and between political rivals. So my question is, what is your position about this SALN, whether the same should be opened or not to the public?
Actually, if I read the Constitution said the SALN is a public document. So I'm the ombudsman, so I should follow the Constitution, which said it's a public document, and therefore it should be available to people. And also, the purpose of the SALN is to make sure people are not tempted, right? And that this is one of the instruments. But I understand about harassment. So most probably it has to be redacted. So there are data that it has to match with the data privacy law, so that you protect people rin. And I would like to raise also that as much of the detail of the SALN should be made available for the protection of the public official also. Because the way it is being made available is based on gross amount. Whereas if you look at the SALN, if it's more detailed, you will know that there's already a justification. So you have this asset, where did it come from? You have this asset, you got it from donation, you got it. But if you put it in a gross amount, it does not say it came from donation, from inheritance, from earnings. So it's hard to battle first impression, right? So if you give the information properly, then it can also be a preventive tools from people harassing you, because you already are able to explain where all your assets are coming from. So there's a balance of enough detail, and so that it cannot be used for harassment, and it can also be used by the public official as a justification of where all his asset is coming from.
And for my next question, Commissioner, you mentioned about the testimonial evidence, quite frowned upon because witnesses might be subject to harassment.
Yes.
What is your position about our present witness protection mechanism?
Well, I think it's robust, but it all depends on resources, right? And we have to accept that our country as a whole does not have enough resources. And it also depends on the security. Is also depends on human being, right? Who can also be tempted. So in itself there's that weakness. So as far as I'm concerned, cases where whistleblower come, I'd rather that if I can present the evidence, not because of his testimony, but because he just pointed it to me, and I can go and look for all other evidence without having to use his testimony. That way, he's protected. For me, that's more, because even if I have the best whistleblower law and mechanism, it's still being run by individuals, and the individual can be corrupted, or somebody can threaten the family of that individual so that they can get into to this person. So you try to minimize that kind of a situation.
Of course, I acknowledge the vulnerability of witnesses, as you have mentioned. But if given the chance to become the next ombudsman, because testimonial evidence is as good as documentary evidence, what reforms or mechanisms perhaps can you introduce to make this witness protection more stringent, more dependable, and more reliable on the part of the prosecution process?
Well, I think the thing there is first the people manning it. You should screen them properly, And the other thing is how do you secure their safety? Maybe your safe houses should be well chosen and well secured. And also next you have to deal with their family. How do you have to go through a mechanism where their identity is also protected, and sure, the other thing is like if they have children, you should be able to assure that witness that those children will continue and be safe studying, and they will. So all these things have to be dealt with.
For a separate line of question, Commissioner, kanina po you said, cases must be prepared thoroughly to avoid dismissal. That is before the Sandigan Bayan, no? Currently po, the committee reports of Congress in exercise of our power to conduct inquiry in aid of legislation are accepted by Ombudsman in the same nature as a complaint. However, there is this 2022 rules which says you have to conduct case build-up first for a period of 60 days, extendable to 30 days, before you can docket that, before you can consider that adversarial, and before you can proceed to preliminary investigation. This rule has been changed in 2025. Ang sabi po sa 2025, once the committee report is received, it will be docketed right away, and preliminary investigation shall proceed immediately. So if given the chance to be the next ombudsman, would you want to pass through the case build-up first or proceed to preliminary investigation? This will pertain to your appreciation of how the Congress is conducting their inquiry in aid of legislation.
I think I should not duplicate any investigative body. And we can deal with that in the preliminary investigation. But in the preliminary investigation, we're still gathering evidence. Then it's not yet filing of a case. So it's going to be dealt in the preliminary investigation. Then, of course, cognizant of the rules of the Supreme Court that you have to observe due process. Then you file a case. I don't believe in duplicating what has been done because we don't have enough time and resources. So based on what the committee report says and what evidence they have, then you evaluate it. So if it's acceptable and those evidence are submitted because we have to be the one to present it as evidence, then we can go ahead and file a complaint.
Thank you. And for the next question, Commissioner, of course, we were taught about the quantum of evidence required in preliminary investigation, that is probable cause.
Yes.
Because of this circular number 15 and number 28 of the DOJ, it was elevated to reasonable certainty of conviction standard. My question is, would you adopt the same standard if given the chance to become the next ombudsman in your prosecution process?
Actually, I have adopted that standard in the Bureau of Internal Revenue. We don't file cases unless we're certain that we can secure a conviction. Because if we're not certain, Diba? We're not convinced ourselves, why will we file a case? No? So in the same way, we should be convinced that we will get a conviction. No? Otherwise, we're wasting everyone's time. No? And people will say, you file a case just because you want to harass somebody or you want to extort. Yung pala, you're not sure. Diba? So to me, there should be a certain certainty that I will get a conviction. And because also we have all, I think it's true in the ombudsman, all government offices does not have enough people to do the work and does not have enough resources. So we should prioritize those cases that we will get a conviction.
Because I acknowledge that currently the ombudsman is adopting the probable cause standard. So is it your intention that to elevate it into reasonable certainty of conviction when you're given the chance to be the next ombudsman?
Yeah, because I think there was a saying, it was pointed out that conviction rate was down
Yeah.
to 20. So probable cause is a word that it ranges. Diba? It can be, that probable cause can include absolute certainty. No? So if you, based on what's happening to the ombudsman, it seems like they're filing case that they're not certain about. That's why there's a lot of dismissal. And the other thing is when cases are dismissed, there's double jeopardy, right? So I mean, it's a way to protect people also. You file a weak case so that it gets dismissed and you cannot go after them anymore. That's also a way to defend themselves. So I don't want that kind of thing to happen also.
I could sense your sharp sense about tax evasion. I wish to go back to the donation. If the same is executed between a parent and a child, or parent and children, what indicators do you have to say that this is fictitious donation? This is not donation.
You know, there's no more, as long as you pay the 6% donor's tax, actually there's no more fixed issues donation. No? So if you pay the 6% donor's tax and you give it to because there need not be any reason for why you're donating it to your children. But in the network method, because you donated it, it came from you. So it's still imputed to you. How did you get this thing that you donated to your child? No? So it does not avoid you from being questioned of where did you get that property. No, it just avoid having to investigate the child. Kasi like what happened to the Napoles, right? The one also investigated was the daughter because he had a car, a condominium abroad, but she did not have any income and there was no donation. So it's presumed to be hers and she did not pay the right taxes. No? But if it was donated to her, then we bring it back to the mom, right? Or to whoever donated it. How were you able to acquire this property to be able to donate it to your child? So it does not preclude you from being investigated just because you donated it.
For my last question, it's been 10 years since you've been detached from the government. So I just want to hear, how do you intend to transition yourself now that you intend to go back to the government?
Actually, my life has always been the same, whether I'm in private sector, and then when I move to government, it's the same. It's just that the difference when I was in BIR is I have to work on my duties Monday to Friday, and I'm left with Saturday, Sunday to do those things that I should have been doing in my personal life Monday to Friday. So it makes me busier. So that's the only difference. No? But other than that, there's no, because I don't go out to parties. I don't really go out a lot. So there's really no in fact, when I'm in government, I have to go out more because I have to attend to some public function, but I prefer to stay home.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good luck on your application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Luistro. Our next interviewer is the Honorable Attorney Nesauro H. Firme, regular member representing the Academe.
Thank you, Attorney Marife. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Afternoon po.
So they had a disclosure earlier that they were your classmate. I'll make a disclosure that you are not my classmate. Just to put balance. Okay. Actually, I have two sets of questions. I forgot to ask Justice Garland about this one because I just wrote it down. The first question comes from the Senator Cayetano. So he wants to know from you, regard your position on the lifestyle check. So we understand that recently there has been a pronouncement that all government officials should undergo a lifestyle check. So what is your position on that? What is your take on that, Commissioner?
Actually, it's a basic tool to prevent people from being corrupted. No, it's a basic tool, the investigative tool that the ombudsman should be doing, because it's basically there's a law that you implement, ill-gotten wealth. How do you do ill-gotten wealth? You do lifestyle check, diba? And there are other laws, RA 6713, that said you should have a simple life. So it is a basic thing that the ombudsman should be doing.
I'll be asking you, Commissioner, my own set of questions. So if appointed as the next ombudsman, what can the stakeholders expect from you?
What the stakeholder can expect from me is I will strictly implement all the laws that the ombudsman is supposed to be implementing. Because after reading all the laws that in preparation for this, there's a lot of things that can be done that has not been done. So, and if we had just implemented it, we would not have find ourselves in this present situation. So, and then the other thing is they can expect that if there's a complaint, we will look into it and investigate it and decide based on facts. Kasi for me, although the private sector complains about corruption of government officials also sometimes find themselves harassed and extorted by private individual or other government official. So the ombudsman should make sure that everyone is protected, that and that everything should be transparent.
So I was sifting through your records, Commissioner, and you had a lot of accomplishments in life, both personal and professional. So my question is, why do you still want to become the ombudsman?
Because I still want to help the Philippines. I want to offer, rather than just do nothing and maybe or complain, then at least I offer to help. And I think every one of us, Filipinos, should be helping our country. It may not be in government, it may be in our private life, but all of us can do something to help.
So instead of complaining, you will be recipient of complaints.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So you were first appointed as BOI, correct? As far as the government service is concerned.
Yeah, BOI governor.
And then you went to
then
the
deputy commissioner,
BIR.
BIR.
Yeah. So you've been appointed by the president, several presidents.
Two presidents.
Two presidents.
Yeah.
So my question is how apolitical are you, having been appointed by presidents?
Well, I'm a technocrat. I'm not a political person. I am not affiliated with any political party. But let me say that there's nothing wrong to be political. No? We are all political animals, but the state is a politics, right? So all of us have a belief about our country, which makes us political. But in terms of how you're describing politics, I'm not a politician because I'm not a member of any party. No? And when I agreed to join government, it's because I think I have something to contribute. No, at the time when President Benigno Aquino was asking me to help, I believe that at that point our country was in dire need of help. No, because when we came in, when we came in, there's no money in the coffer of the government, and therefore we need to. Because in the campaign of President Aquino, I was the policy secretariat. No? So what my role is to study all the government department and inform the president what are the problems, what are the possible solutions, no? And for him to come up with his policy. And during his campaign, his concern is we don't have money. And basically, that's why the campaign, no new tax, no tax increase, actually came from me. Because I said, you don't really have to impose new taxes, you just have to collect it properly. And you should control expenditure so that there's no wastage. If you do that, you don't have to impose any new taxes, which we proved to be true. No? During our time, we had 3 credit upgrade, which made us investment grade, which have not been upgraded since then. So it proves what we have been trying to say. No? And if you control corruption, you will have money and you will have economic development.
So, Commissioner, independence is one of the qualities of a good ombudsman. Okay, so in discharging your past, including your present duties, in other words, even in your private life, can you tell us an instance where you displayed your independence?
Okay, being a BIR commissioner, I'm sure some people will approach my husband for help. No? I'm happy my husband fully supported me. No? But my rule for everyone who approach my husband is that the answer to your request is no. No matter how valid it is, because the mere fact you went through my husband. And good thing my husband support me also. No? So this shows my independence. No? And secondly, the other thing is, I think I'm the only commissioner who nobody knows the face of my mom or my brother or my sister because none of them goes to the Bureau of Internal Revenue. And even if they get invited, they refuse to go. No? So there's really a separation between my personal life and my work. And the good thing also when I was doing my work is just the President Aquino never meddled. He never called me up to say, please place this person into this position. He never called me up to say, can you address this assessment? He never did that. The only time he called me, is for what? Because his favorite Korean restaurant was closed by BIR. He was going to eat there that evening, and the PSG said, "Sir, the restaurant is closed." And President Aquino said, "Why was it closed?" He said, "The BIR closed it." So they called me up and said, "Why did you close it?" I said, "First, it doesn't go to the commissioner." So I called up the regional director, and he said that because we're assessing that restaurant a sum of money and they are not willing to pay, so they close it. So the president said to me, jokingly, "Okay, now you have to learn how to cook Korean food because you closed my restaurant." So that's the only instance that he called me just making me asal.
So next question, did you learn how to cook Korean food?
No, I learned how to cook roast beef.
Integrity is another quality of a good ombudsman, Commissioner. No? So can you tell us an instance where your integrity was put to test, and how did you navigate through that?
I think I answered the instance about one of my relatives, no, that somebody was teaching them that you don't have to, you make it appear like you're donating it to us and we'll pay you abroad. No, you don't have to circumvent the capital gains tax. No? So basically, I told my relative, don't do that because I'm going to file a tax evasion case against you. And also, to make sure it doesn't happen, I called up my regional director in RDO to make sure that you don't allow this transaction because it's not a sale. It's not a donation. So I think that's...
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Well, you've been in public service for how many years? 6 years.
9
9 years now,
Yeah.
including the BOI and the
Yeah.
deputy. Okay. So how much value do you give to public perception?
You know, my philosophy is you should always do what is right. Because no matter what you decide, 50% of the room will always not be happy. So the only thing that can support you and allow you to sleep peacefully at night is doing what is right. And the principle about doing what is right is true not only when you're in public service, it's true in our family, right? So even in our family, when we make a decision, one half of the family will be unhappy, the other half will be happy. But the only thing that can support you is doing what is right. So in that sense, as long as I'm doing what is right, I don't let other people's opinion affect me.
And that brings me to the next question. Public criticisms, how do you handle that?
I listen to it and determine whether there's basis for it. If there is a basis for it, then I do something to correct what needs to be corrected. If there's no basis for it, then I explain. Right. So I think a lot of people have heard me on radio and TV, wherein I explain, there's criticism, like for example, there are criticism, why did I impose VAT on tolls, right? So you have to, that's part of the job. Then you explain why it's like that, no? Or there are criticism unfounded that why am I taxing the sari-sari store, no? So you have to explain, the law does not distinguish between rich and poor, right? It's like jaywalking. It doesn't say if you're poor, you can jaywalk. If you're rich, you cannot, or the reverse. No? So you have to explain to the public why it's like that.
Next question, Commissioner. No? So let us assume you are appointed as the ombudsman, as the next ombudsman. And the second assumption is it is already 2029. In other words, tumawid ka na to the next administration. Okay. So there are 5 things in my mind that I want you to rank. So one being the most significant, as far as you are concerned, number 5 will be the least significant. Not necessarily irrelevant, no, but the least significant. So number 1 would be the president that appointed you to this post, ombudsman. Number 2 would be the incumbent president, no, by 2029. So it's the next administration. Number 3 would be the public perception included. No? Number 4, the safety of your family, no, including your husband, no, and your relatives. But I know you shoot, diba? You still shoot. No? Maybe you don't have problem with that. Number 5, your personal goal, which you mentioned earlier.
My priority is the public, not perception, but public interest. Then the second is the safety of my family. The third is personal goal. The last 2 are equal, the appointing and the incumbent president.
Next question, Commissioner. I understand that there will be some government officials, incumbent, who would help you to get this ombudsman post. No? So they are instrumental to your appointment. And then one day, they committed some offenses, no, in relation to their office. So would you have the courage, the nerve, and guts to file administrative and criminal cases against those persons who were instrumental to your appointment?
Yes, because they violated the law.
The last question, Commissioner, no? If ever appointed, what significant development in your life would make you decide to quit the ombudsman post? It is supposed to be a 7-year office.
Probably I might die. So it will shorten my stint.
Only death would make you quit.
When I applied, it's with when I decided to apply, it's really to do the job. So as long as I am able to do the job, then there should be no reason for me to, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Firme. Our last interviewer is the Honorable Justice Jose Catral Mendoza, regular member representing the retired justices of the Supreme Court.
Thank you very much, Attorney Marife. Good afternoon, Commissioner. You stated that you will stay as an ombudsman as long as you can do the job. What do you think is the job of the ombudsman?
The job of the ombudsman is to investigate, to implement the laws regarding anti-graft and corruption, plunder, all these laws that govern the behavior, conduct of the public official, no? And to investigate and prosecute any violation thereof. And also, I think the other thing that the job of the ombudsman is, if he sees that there's something that needs to be changed, he can recommend that this be changed, no? Like a law that festers corruption. So there might be some changes that they can also recommend to the legislature, have a discussion. Can we simplify this law because it seems like it's hard to follow? It creates corruption, area for corruption. I think that those are things that the ombudsman should also be doing.
Earlier, you mentioned that in the Philippines, corruption is endemic, if not prevalent. You've been in the government for around 8 years. What do you think is the cause of this?
I think the cause of it is we have forgotten our values as a Filipino, and we don't have a concept of nationalism and patriotism. And I think the problem is we don't really have an ideology. So those are the things why, and also the other things is our youth are trained to be, even ourselves, we gauge our success based on materialism, how much money we have, what car do we drive, and then we even reward our children this is my other advocacy, my pet peeve, that I wanted parents to go back to where my parents were, when you teach children to do things because it is good and it is the right thing to do. Nowadays, parents does not do that. They give a carrot, which is a material thing. They tell their children, finish school, so I'll give you a car. Get high grade, I'll send you abroad. It's already like bribing, right? So that's why it becomes endemic. Whereas if you say, finish school because it's good for your future. After they do that, then you give them a reward, then that's okay because they're striving for the right reason. But now, the objective are not really what it should have been the way we were trained before.
You think that is the main cause, not the system,
That
not the system.
No, because the system only follows the values of the people. Eh? Diba? You will not think of a system that will hinder your values. If you have good values, then you put up a system that will support your values. But in the first place, your value shocks. So your system, the one that you put up, will not be a good system at all.
Commissioner, how do you deal with criticism?
I listen to it and evaluate it. If it is a valid criticism, then I address it. No? I get the input and make some adjustment. However, if it is not a valid criticism, then I explain myself.
Okay, what frustrates you?
What frustrates me is that our system because to me, every government official are intelligent, head of agency are intelligent, no? And they know the problem and they put up solutions. No? What frustrates me is when there's a new head, what we do is because we did not introduce it, we delete it, and then we now work again from the beginning, whereas time is short. So shouldn't we just build on it? Because we have so many problems to solve. So that's my frustration. Instead of building on things, what we do is we destroy things because we cannot get credit for it.
Earlier, you mentioned that you read the laws and jurisprudence on the Ombudsman, the Office of the Ombudsman. What decision of the Sandigan Bayan you do not agree with?
I don't really, because I cannot put myself into the position of the Sandigan Bayan because they have facts that they are looking at, right? As far as I'm concerned, a government agency should respect the decision of another government agency. No? I cannot say that I disagree with them because I don't have the complete circumstances and facts that surround that case.